even on a dumpster home in the ghetto. I mean, it's still expensive to even live in the ghetto now. That's how expensive and what a rich playland Toronto's become. Today, folks, as a millennial who is trying to buy real estate in the greater Toronto area, I wanted to share with you, based on your comments, your questions, the details into the financing, the mortgage cost. Is this an asset, a liability? How do we look at this moving forward, and why we're kind of making this decision now? If that is a conversation you'd appreciate, in return, I simply ask that you hit that like button, because we're going to talk about renting, and is that a better option for most people, and just investing the money otherwise. There's just so many ways to think about this, and there's always a lot of varying opinions that we take into consideration. And let's get into the first opinion before we look at the rental market, the growth in the Ontario market with real estate. But Vic Gill says, let me respectfully present an alternative view. After inflation, maintenance, property taxes, you will still come out ahead, but running the numerous calculations, I've concluded that renting and investing, everything else, if you have the discipline, you will be better financially. And I want to just kind of iterate that this, I think, is very dependent on where you live. If I could rent a comfortable 2-bed, 2-bath condo or house or whatever for less than an entire annual salary for most people, I think that would be probably the more opportune conclusion to come to, especially if you're living in places like Alberta. However, the problem right now is in the rental market here is if you want to live comfortably. Again, I'm 30 years old, in my 30s. I'm still living between parents' basements with my fiance. And when you look at what it costs to rent somewhere, you're going to be spending around $3,000 plus a month. And especially if they're new buildings, they are no longer rent controlled anymore, because typically if in rent controlled buildings, the government mandates that they can really only raise the rent 1 to 2% on an annual basis. But now that they're lifting that on new builds, your rent could go up year after year with no conclusion to how high that could go unless you just plan on leaving, right? And I know you're seeing places here, and we're looking at Markham. We're looking at anywhere within the GTA, really. I'm considering, Richmond Hill, closer to Toronto, but we're just going to use Markham as an example here. Now, you're going to see places that are listed in the 2500s. If we click one of these, I should point out to you that these are all basement apartments. And again, I am not someone who's trying to struggle to live here. I'm making 6 figures a year. We have great savings. I am kind of tired of the idea of living in a basement, especially if we're looking forward to having kids or, some kind of a family life at some point in the future here. So you have to keep in mind, even basement apartments at 2,500 is an exceptional amount of money that you have to take into consideration, right? So let's talk about some of the costs that come into play when you're actually buying. For us, again, this is variable depending on who's buying, and I do want you to keep in mind, I do not look at real estate as an investment whatsoever. But again, using Ontario, the greater Toronto area, is kind of a little sphere, a bubble. If you bought anywhere, let's say 8 to 10 years ago, the value of your property has 3x pretty much. So even if you're just living there and you had a mortgage from a bank, that extended amount of money you borrowed from the bank, you saw an insane return on, even with the cost. And if you fix the place up, put a little more money into it, forget the phantom cost, the utilities, the roofing repairs, whatever, your return was still absolutely insane, even on a dumpster home in the ghetto. I mean, it's still expensive to even live in the ghetto now. That's how expensive and what a rich playland Toronto's become for the wealthy, right? But let's just talk about mortgage cost, right? Because I'm not presuming this property value is going to go up. Hell, we're not looking for luxury condos by any metric. We're just kind of playing within areas. We're looking even for fixer-upper, older condos that perhaps even have a higher maintenance fee. But let's just presume, again, we're in a lucky situation where we're only going to be probably borrowing at most, hopefully, around $200,000 at the 6% interest rate. I mean, we're looking at a monthly payment of around $1,200, and that's on a 30-year fix. The reason I take a 30-year over a shorter mortgage is within 3 years, I would expect these interest rates to come down. You're allowed to put an extra 15% a year on that mortgage. And then when the renewal comes up, hopefully we've made even more money we've set aside in a high interest savings account that we'd use to lump sum again into that mortgage after the 3 years. So I could easily see these payments dropping by half, just with the interest rates coming down and with us putting extra money aside within that 3 years. So our mortgage payments could easily drop to $500 or $600. Now, again, let's talk about the maintenance fee on a condo. You're looking maybe $500 to $1,000 a month, and those are the areas we're playing within. It sounds like a lot of money, but keep in mind, a lot of the maintenance fees do include heat, hydro with some of these, the water. You do get some of the utilities extension, especially if you're paying a higher maintenance. So let's just take it at the very top of around $8,000 a month. Property taxes, maybe between $2,000 and $2,500. So let's just say all in here, you're probably, right now in this current macro environment, $200K borrowed, you're probably looking at payments around $2,500 a month. That would be a comfortable condo, right? But that's pretty feasible compared to living in a basement apartment for that same price. So let's kind of round this conversation off to actually what kind of real estate we're looking at, because he says good luck with buying a home. One of the biggest things I'm hearing is not telling you to time the market, but I've heard that real estate recession will start in December, a recession involving lower house prices and lower interest rates. Could be too good to be true for people looking to buy a home, but it's something that I've been keeping in mind. So you do not want to wait to buy real estate. I have been aimlessly talking about this bubble, and it's never going to get resolved. I've gone into the factors of the greenbelt limits, the lacking of building permits, just how hard it is to get permits. My dad does foundational work in homes, and people will go so far out of their way to avoid the six-figure permitting it takes to build a new property that my dad lifted a home up, fixed a foundation, they tore 3 walls off of the house, left 1 wall, built a new wall over that wall, and then built 3 new walls, just to say that they never had to tear the house down. And that has led to this really interesting market where the supply and demand just isn't there, because we just hit 40 million people from the population in Canada for the first time, and most of those immigrants coming in are flooding into places like Toronto, the GTA, or Vancouver, where the jobs market is hot, where they can get higher paying jobs. A lot of these people are educated and getting into probably hopefully much better income circumstances. But when we take a look at the real estate market based on the numbers, and I know spring tends to be a hotter market, we hit the lows back sometime in January, and ever since the market has done nothing but go up. And I think people have to really understand that it doesn't matter right now how many new homes they build. They can never build them fast enough, at least I can foresee for the next 3 to 5 years, to ever catch up to this demand. And I'm seeing it while we're looking at deals. I mean, look at this. The prices have started to skyrocket. Now let's take a moment and look at the actual consideration of the supply on the market here. If we just go into realtor.ca and we look up GTA, now let's presume you're in our situation where you're looking for something comfortable, that you just perhaps 2 beds, 2 or more beds, maybe 2 baths, right? Just to be comfortable, to give a place that you can grow into, rather than, just buying a really condensed condo downtown for say $1 million. It's maybe 800 or 900 square feet. But let's just say the max price for probably somebody in our situation, I don't even want to spend this much. It's even crazy to consider these numbers, considering how far this money would go in any other province. Hell, even Alberta. I mean, you look at what 800 grand gets you and you're living like a millionaire. But let's just presume 2 beds or 2 or more beds. And let's just take again into consideration, perhaps 2 or more baths, right? So let's just zoom in here and just take a look at what just popped up for us. Well, firstly, let's zoom in a little more just so we can see the surrounding GTA area here. Firstly, if you look at Newmarket, if you go really far north, there is 11 properties available. Aurora, there's 23. You come to Richmond Hill, what do we got here? Maybe 30 properties. Look at Markham, maybe another 30 properties. Do you know how crazy that is? Stouffville only has 7 properties available under those conditions, and I don't think these conditions are crazy. I mean, I can show you homes in Richmond Hill and Markham, and again, these are probably more luxury based areas, but there's like 3-bed, 2-bath homes being listed for $3 to $4 million freaking dollars. This is just absolutely absurd, and I would implore all the generations before me that you need to be diligent. Hard times make stronger people, and you need to be in a position where you're willing to live with multiple people in basements. You need to be willing to leave the province, go somewhere much more affordable, look for remote work perhaps, or look for jobs in areas where the cost of living isn't this freaking insane, because our competition looking to buy real estate here, again, this is what is driving the prices up. I've seen luxury condos, I've looked at them, things in the 800,000 range, they get listed for 8 and they're selling for in the 9s. Things that are getting listed around 758 are selling well above 800. And that is just the reality of this market at these higher interest rates. People just don't seem to care, because again, when you're talking about 50 properties in a pretty large area, I'm sure there's enough rich people that are bottom feeding like we are, that might just be trying to get their kids apartments, their kids a place to live, and this is what they have to look at. So they are competing for this bottom feeding market that we're in. So again, we're looking for places that can be fixer-uppers, older buildings. I don't care. I've looked at luxury, I've looked at outer skirt areas of the market, and I said, these are a price range. We are not by any means like being super fickle about this. Like I said, my dad knows construction. We could buy a really low in place, fix it up, add some value to it, and then again, over renting, where all our money's going to the renter. Now we have an asset property value that if we want to leave at some point, if we're not constrained here by family anymore, we want to go live in Alberta for a little while, go travel for a year or two, we could just rent the place out, easily collect around $3,000 a month. And or we could even pull equity value out of the condo and use it for something perhaps down the road. These are options that are going to, I think, financially set us up in a much greater way that is hard to appreciate maybe perhaps today, but who knows, maybe in 5-10 years from now, we'd be so thankful we did this in a place where it looks like the price of renting is even going to continue to go higher. Now, I'm lucky enough to be in a situation where I have a lot of liquidity. Again, living with our parents, having that pure luxury, and I know a lot of people don't. Dave Ramsey hates us for this. If you don't know Dave Ramsey, I'm sure you probably do. Let's be real if you're watching this video. Because of that help, which I don't see any other way of getting ahead in this market without that kind of help, I have this kind of liquidity situation between corporate accounts, tax retirement accounts, personal savings accounts. And somebody pointed out that if you had enough cash in your corporation, I think your corporation can give you a loan or a mortgage, and you could pay it back to your corporation with interest, which would be like paying yourself, basically, which is like paying back yourself instead of paying back the bank if you look at the loan or mortgage from the bank. So I've never heard of this before, and this is why I love posting videos about this stuff. I know I try and keep it relatively personal without getting too much into my personal details, because you guys will offer comments like this that are helpful to everyone, I think, because somebody pointed out with this comment that a shareholder loan is an agreement to borrow funds from your corporation for any purpose. Could be a car, could be real estate. The idea is that the shareholder loan is temporary and it would need to be repaid to the company within the following fiscal year, or could be included in the shareholder's personal income. So I never considered this. Now my corporation owes me some startup capital I put into it, like $35,000, that I am drawing against because I can put it in my personal name without having the tax infliction of the higher income bracket, because I still have a job where I'm making reasonable money. But with this idea specifically, I could pull that money out without it affecting my income tax bracket and then pay it back. The problem is it has to be paid back within a year, which becomes kind of convoluted. Now, I don't know if this article is specific for Ontario. I am doing my corporate taxes this Wednesday, so I'm going to talk to the accountant about it and see what the possibilities are. Because if you could pay it back over a longer period of time than a year without it affecting my personal income tax brackets, then yeah, this would be something I would definitely consider as a possibility. But for now, it's mostly looking at my tax advantage accounts, hardly touch anything in the corporation, so I'm not putting any of that into my name. That can grow really tax efficiently into the future. I could use that as a backup income in case my job becomes a little bit more volatile for whatever reason. But yeah, I'm playing with all these levers and trying to figure out what's possible. But the thing is as we look at real estate today, I need to have the liquid funds. So it makes more sense to just get that money there. I might not need all of it, but it needs to be there and it needs to be ready. So that's the position we're putting ourselves in. So as if something comes up that makes sense, the right price point, we can start putting offers in. And that gives a lot of leeway. We are lucky enough to have quite a bit of leeway, but our leeway is within the bottom feeding of this market. So and it's crazy to think that to be a millionaire now in Ontario is literally to be middle class. It's kind of hard to stomach, really, when you look at the availability that's just there on the market. It's just ridiculous. But I'll pass that question off to you. I'd love to know what you think in that comment section below.